Hi, my name is Natalie Rogers, and I'm the Climate Action and Sustainability Coordinator for the City of Milwaukee. I'm here today with our urban forester, Julian Lawrence, to learn a little bit more about Milwaukee's urban forest program and the city's canopy goals. Can you tell us a little bit about the urban forest?
Sure. So the urban forest is actually a collection of all the trees, shrubs, and plants that exist throughout the city. These can exist on public property, private property, commercial property, anywhere that is within the city. And we use this perspective, this greater perspective of the whole, to try and make better decisions that affect the community as a whole, including citizens and as well as wildlife and the plants all around us.
You want to walk over there and take a look at some of the trees that the city's planted so far?
Sure.
We're here today at our Public Works campus. So if you see some big trucks moving in the background, it's just the city at work. And Julian, when were these trees planted?
So these are a grove of dawn redwoods, which we planted now, I would say 2 years ago. They are a deciduous conifer. They are just starting to bud out. We have 16 of them here. This was just a grove of area of grass lawn, and we have converted it into a future forest of dawn redwoods. Additionally, we have some more trees up on the hillside, some different species as well. We have some coast redwoods and giant sequoias and some pines. All of these species are notorious for living really long and therefore absorbing lots of carbon out of the atmosphere. So we've taken an area that was just an expanse of grass and we're turning it into its own little carbon sink. Additionally, this will be a wonderful area for residents as well as employees to come out and hang out in the summertime in the shade of the trees. The trees, these are deciduous, so they'll lose their leaves in the fall and allow the sunlight to get through over to our facility as well when they get to be really tall in a long time from now. So this was a really big conversion, and we're really pleased with how it's come out. And I won't get to see these trees as really, really large forest trees, but I do very much enjoy the thought of how they will look when they are there.
So I heard you mention shading. So I do a lot of work for climate action, and I know the city has big climate goals. So what's the importance of trees in terms of shading in the future climate and the other benefits that trees provide our community?
Absolutely. So shading is going to be a huge, huge benefit that trees provide as our summers get warmer and drier in the future. Their ability to shade keeps the sun off pavement, off buildings, and keeps the city cooler overall. They also give off a little bit of respiration water, which keeps it a little more humid as well and keeps it cooler. So trees are going to be a very, very important part of keeping our city cool in the future.
And trees also provide a lot of other community benefits like public health and environmental services, right?
Environmental services, yes. They absorb stormwater when it comes through. They provide wildlife habitat for all the critters that like to live here and share our city with us. Public health benefits, there's been numerous studies that have been done about how much better public health is with green vegetation around. So there's numerous benefits to having a healthy, vibrant urban forest.
That's great. Well, I'm happy to see how these trees grow in time.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we can go take a look at the other urban forest facilities we have here at City of Milwaukie.
Yes.
So Julian, can you talk to us about Milwaukee's urban forest program?
Sure. So Milwaukee's urban forest program started in 2017 with the creation of the tree board and the expansion of the natural resources department, or natural resources section of the public works department. The tree board has been working with city staff to update tree code and make an urban forest plan.
And they're like an advisory council, right?
Correct,
or advisory
yes.
body?
They are a citizen advisory body, and they help us to make sure that our urban forest management plan is working and our tree code is as best it can be for citizen involvement.
When was the urban forest management plan adopted?
The urban forest management plan was adopted in 2019, and one of the really big aspects of that was setting a goal of having 40% canopy in the city by 2040.
And that's also in our climate action plan, right?
That is also in our climate action plan as well. So that is a really important goal that we have set to make sure that we continue to grow the trees we have, but plant many more as well.
That's awesome. And so how many people do we have here at the City of Milwaukee working on our urban forest goals?
Our urban forest goals would include, in the natural resources section, that would be myself and another worker as well. We're covering more of the on-the-ground stuff, the nursery here and the planting and pruning outside in the city. And then you cover some of the aspects as well.
That's awesome. So we do a lot here at Public Works for our urban forest work. So you can see here, we're at our Public Works facility, and this is actually where Julian does a lot of his work growing the trees that we're actually planting in the community. So Julian, can you tell us a little bit about this facility and kind of what you do here?
Sure. So as you see here, we have our own small nursery, which includes 2 small greenhouses. Many of the trees which we grow in the city right now are not expected to do very well in the future. So what I have done here is I have set up an experimental nursery. These are species you can't readily get from private nurseries. You don't see them growing around outside there. These are trees and other shrubs that we are experimenting to see how will they do in the climate we expect to have in the future. So we have a lot of diverse species, and they are generally growing in areas with climates that we expect to have here in the future. So none of these trees are actually available to the public. Very few of them are, as you can see, are even ready to go out. But this is our experiment. This is our attempt to make sure that our urban forest of the future continues to be green and thriving, to make sure that we have tree species growing out there that are going to be the best trees we can have in the future.
And wasn't there a bit of an adventure to get some of the seeds to grow some of these trees?
There was a long adventure, yes. I took a long adventure through Central and Southern California to get numerous species we have here. A lot of climate predictions show that our climate in 80 to 100 years from now will be much like Central California's now. So I was down there collecting many species, several of which we have growing here. I've also grabbed species from other areas in various trips to southern France. The Mediterranean climate is also very much similar to here. And so, yeah, we have, in fact, all of in front here are all California species.
That's great. And they all look like different heights. Is there like a certain, like when are they ready to go out into the bigger Milwaukee?
So as these are public trees, let's say we have a species here that is going to be, yes, this is ready, it's okay to be here now, and it's going to be ready to go in the future. According to our public works standards, they will need to be 2-inch caliper, so they will need to be very large trees. So there'll be at least 5 to 10 years before any of these trees are ready to go out into the...
And can you talk to us a little bit about like the difference between street trees and private trees and public trees?
Sure. So a public tree is a tree that's on any kind of public property. It could be a public park, could be a right-of-way along the side of the road like a street tree. It could be here on our public facility or a police facility as well. Private trees are trees which is on any kind of private property, commercial property, home property. Those particular trees make up about 80% of the forest canopy that we have right now. So private trees are a vast majority of what the urban forest is at this time.
And are there certain protections for public trees versus private trees?
Yeah, at the moment we have completed our public tree code, which allows for or sets up the regulations for how we manage our public trees, our park trees, our street trees, and trees on other public facilities. So those are all set and regulated via code. And we, with the tree board, are working on setting up regulations for private trees as well. That is probably another year out or so.
That's great, and that's part of our comprehensive plan implementation process.
Yes. Yep.
So more to come for that for Milwaukee. So we talked a little bit how Milwaukee's future climate is going to be a little bit different than it is today. So I know as our climate action sustainability person that it's probably going to be warmer and it's probably going to be a lot drier. How does that affect trees?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that's why we have this experimental nursery. So when you are facing a summer which is not only longer, but it is warmer and drier, you have to have trees that are able to adapt to that. And so some of the species we have growing here are from climates that already have that. So for instance, we have right here, this is an Italian stone pine. This is a tree which grows throughout the Western Mediterranean region. And in fact, it is the original source of pine nuts. Those are the seeds. Directly behind it here, we have Mediterranean cypress. I actually collected the seed from this tree in Provence, France. Also a tree that is well adapted to long, dry summers. We're growing them here to see how do they tolerate our winters. As you can see, the pine has no problem coming through our last winter. The cypress is doing well, but it's turned just a little bit of color, so it's a little cold for it. But this is the idea of the experimental nursery, is to try species, like see how we know they'll be able to tolerate our future summers. How are they going to be able to tolerate our current winters? So this is just an example of some of that trial and error. Over here we have a cork oak, also from the Mediterranean region. These grow really well. Actually, we have a couple on the lot here which are growing super, super well. So very pleased with that species. But as we move down, you see we have some other species. Right here, these are young Spanish chestnuts. A species which should grow really well here, but also provide lots of wildlife value as well.
And so how does the city balance native plantings versus maybe non-native climate adapted plantings?
Exactly. I actually really like that conversation because I have, always been an advocate for planting native species wherever possible. But in looking at how climate change is coming, I've had to expand my idea of what is native. So Western red cedars, a native tree, a wonderful tree. I love that tree. I've planted so many of them. Looking at future climate, they're just not going to do very well away from any kind of riparian corridor. So I have to try and expand my idea of native. If you think about how climate is moving, like it's going to be like our California climate is going to be moving north to Milwaukee, then you kind of think of the plants, our expansion of native is to plants that are down there as well. A really good example of that is right here. These are California buckeyes. They do not grow here natively, but they grow in the very next floristic province south of us in the California province. This is a wonderful tree species. It is deciduous in the summer when it gets really hot. It will lose its leaves. This is the way it adapts to really hot summers, is by just shedding its leaves and growing really well. As you can see, other species we have, like the Spanish chestnuts, have no leaves on them right now. The California buckeyes do.
Looking beautiful.
Yeah.
And so I can see that there's, this one's about 6 inches.
Mm-hmm.
This guy's about 2 feet. And then we have these beautiful trees right here, which
Yeah.
are, you can see, quite a bit taller than me.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
would you say that these ones are almost about ready to go out? Is that kind of how the city decides?
They are looking at about probably next year. They'll be ready to go out. I already have a spot for them to go out as well. Another thing you'll note through several parts of the nursery is we have a lot of evergreen trees. So many evergreen species have adapted to hotter, drier summers. They do more of their photosynthesis in the wintertime when it's cooler, and they tend to go a little more dormant in the summer when it's hotter and drier. So we have several evergreen species. This is a broadleaf evergreen from Chile. This is maton tree. So yeah,
coming to a neighborhood near you.
Exactly. So we have multiple different species happening around here. Just for an example of natives, this here are ponderosa pines. These are Willamette Valley ponderosa pines. They are a native, and all climate predictions show that they should continue to do very well here. So we may not have Western red cedars growing here in the future. We very much will have ponderosa pines. We know they grow here now. I plant them now. I continue to grow more at this moment as well. So there's that idea of native. We just have to be very sure of what natives we have, how they're going to survive in the future, and make sure that we're planting trees that are going to be able to survive 100 years in the future.
And that's kind of how the urban forest management plan can help us, because it's kind of like a guide to plant, protect, and promote trees in Milwaukee in a strategic way, which is great.
Yep, exactly. Make sure that the trees we have now survive to the future, and the trees we plant now survive to the future as well.
That's awesome.
So here's a nerd moment. So this is an example of a species that is from Southern California. This is called Cuyamaca cypress. And a lot of what we see throughout the nursery is a lot of oaks and a lot of cypresses. Both of those are species really well adapted to hot, dry climates, as opposed to what you see a lot around town with cherries and dogwoods. Both of those species just aren't expected to do really well in the future. A Cuyamaca cypress here, these are wonderful trees that I got seed from a collector. In the wild, there's only approximately 40 to 50 of them left. Right now, right here, I have over 90 of them. I'm really, really pleased to be able to experiment with a tree that not only will be wonderful, can be wonderful for the future, but will also be saving a species. Cuyamaca cypress is threatened in the wild by wildfires. Their wildfire regime has just come back too quickly for them to actually continue to reproduce. So we have here just a great example of a species which would be good for the city and good for the environment, and is also good for species preservation. So many of the species in the greenhouse are actually not from this area, so they're not adapted to many of the pathogens that we have in this area. So part of my greenhouse regime is actually trying to keep things sterile. And one of the easiest ways to bring pathogens into a greenhouse is on your shoes. So we have the requirement of spraying off your shoes with rubbing alcohol before entering the greenhouse to make sure that we aren't introducing any pathogens which may affect these plants. So as you come inside here, you see we have lots of young plants. These are only approximately a year and 5 months old now. Many of these species are most all of these species are from California. Several of them are very experimental. That's why they're just starting out in the greenhouse. We aren't quite ready to give them a full blast of Oregon winter yet. But we wanted to, these were all plants which I collected as seed and brought them back up here, start growing them. I give them a year or two in the greenhouse, then start moving them outside, see how they tolerate wintertime, summertime. What's really, really amazing is how fast they've grown in here in the greenhouse. And also what's very visible to me as I'm working in the greenhouse year round is able to see once it gets really hot, like we have the really, really super hot days in August and September, the greenhouse is open. It's just regular outside temperature in here, and they love it. They grow really fast. So that's a really good sign, at the very least, that they're ready for the warm temperature. They love that. They put on all this growth when it gets really warm. And again, over here, primarily oaks along the backside, primarily cypresses along the front side here. One species to mention, the Douglas fir is the iconic tree of the Pacific Northwest. In Central California, they have a different Douglas fir, which is called the bigcone fir. It is a dry and fire-adapted species. So I did get some seed from them and have them growing here to experiment how they will do. At the current rate, Douglas fir is going to be, it could be marginal in the future on how well it survives in a hot city environment. But this particular fir should do just fine. So that's just another example of experimenting with near natives or trees which are similar to what we have here today. So this is one I really, really am proud of to show. And beyond that, it's really just simple greenhouse maintenance, and making sure that these guys are ready to try out in the city.
So Julian, I think this is a great example of some of the work that the city is doing to green up our own facilities. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what we're seeing here today?
Sure. This is an area that we've planted out in our public parking area, which contains 3 very large oak trees. These trees will grow up to be extremely large. They will throw a lot of shade around the area. Additionally, this is an area where stormwater comes in and infiltrates into the ground. Also, all of the understory of this are plants which are very, very good attractors of pollinators. So this is a pollinator garden, a stormwater facility, and a tree area, tree shade area, all in one.
So in about 40 years, some of this pavement that we see all around us will be nice and a little bit cooler during our hot Milwaukee summers.
It'll be a lot cooler with those oaks shading it, yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Julian, this is another great example, I think, of some of the work that we've done in our city facilities to help our canopy goals. Can you talk to us about this one?
Sure. This is an entire hillside which was covered with blackberry only 2 years ago. And we came through and had all the blackberry removed, and we have planted 83 trees in this whole back hillside area, various species, to make sure that instead of being a blackberry patch, a weed patch, in the future we will have not only long-lived species which will be adapted to the climate, but it'll be a much better wildlife habitat area as well.
And didn't we have some community help with this project?
We did have some community help with this project coming out to help us remove the blackberries. Yeah, this was at least 6 feet deep in blackberry, and so having them in here to help us remove that was a really great asset.
If you're interested in projects like this, you can always help us on future Arbor Day events and other volunteering opportunities to green up our city spaces. Well, thank you, Julian, for taking us for a tour of Milwaukee's urban forest facilities. Any last parting words for what somebody could do to help our urban forest canopy goals?
Well, yeah, I think it's really important that people get to know trees, the trees around them, and how the city's involved in preserving our urban forests. It's really important for our citizens to be involved in that. They can go to our website, our sustainability page, and check out our urban forest website as well. Additionally, they can read our urban forest management plan. These are things that everybody can do that and become part of the solution for our urban forest.
And there's on our city web pages, there's opportunities to volunteer for local organizations. Milwaukee often coordinates with Friends of Trees, and we also host our own planting events for Arbor Day and other celebrations. So if you want to get involved with Milwaukee's urban forest and our larger climate and environmental work, just visit milwaukeeoregon.gov and visit our sustainability pages to learn more. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Thanks, Julian.
It's a part of the experiment is that there is plenty of casualties in my nursery. People look at this and like, wow, you grow plants so well. And I'm like, you don't see how many I kill.